Secretum Omega. Did this actually happen? Did this interview actually take place? Is the information that was given, is it real? Fake? Was it information that was based upon actual history and real events? Or is it more disinformation to confuse us? What we do know is this: they do not believe in our God. And when I say our God, I am inclusive of all the religions of all the world. What we do know, these aliens do not believe in any of them. This is a confession of a Jesuit who confesses to a pact between the Vatican and aliens. It is claimed by this Jesuit that this started a crisis. The background: an Italian investigative journalist believes he found sufficient evidence to confirm the existence of a top secret Vatican organization known basically as SIV, Service of Information to the Vatican. It's the Vatican's secret service, the intelligence service. And they allege that they specialize in extraterrestrial affairs and the return of Planet X. Yes, I said Planet X. The journalists also helped confirm the existence of a Vatican security clearance known as the Secretum Omega that governs access to this information. This helps explain why former Vatican insiders such as Monsignor Corrado Balducci appears to be out of the loop when it comes to such information. This was revealed in a personal conversation this reporter had with this Jesuit, with Monsignor Balducci back in October 2005. The secret Vatican organization, SIV, was first revealed in the research of Cristoforo Barbeto, who described how he was approached by email in 2000 by a Jesuit member of the SIV, and later personally met him in 2001. The Jesuit, who remains anonymous, confirmed the following. 1. The 1954 Eisenhower extraterrestrial meeting. 2. That George Adamski did have a secret meeting with the Pope. And 3. The return of Planet X. And finally, the existence of the U.S. hyperspeed vehicle Aurora capable of space travel. Now, this is odd that if this is in fact true, and they certainly give a lot of tantalizing tidbits of fact, but what I find most interesting on this one is the mention of Aurora. That's been a top secret project. It is rumored that Aurora is a new propulsion system that has taken spacecraft into deep space. Yes, ET exists. No, ET does not believe in God. Yes, they control us, as you're going to see. So here are some questions. Was there an actual meeting? Is there a celestial object on its way to Earth? Do aliens live on this planet? Are there other civilizations? Are there different species? Do aliens worship God? And is it the same God or gods that we worship? This is supposedly an actual, real picture of Nibiru, Planet X, by a deep space probe financed and paid for by the Vatican. So is it real? And of what? And where? What's really going on here? Well, let's get into the interview. I believe that will help all of us maybe pierce this veil and see who is telling the truth. The interviewer asked the first question of the Jesuit. How did you join the SIV? The Jesuit. The SIV includes elements from different realities. Wow. How about a bombshell right in the first sentence? All closely related to the church and especially composed, at least in the executive part, by priests mostly belonging to the order of the Jesuits, Benedictines, and sisters. Around a little over 100 elements. Now, elements are people, folks. Isn't it odd how they use terminology? It may seem few, but not so when you consider that in every part of the world where there is a priest or a nun is a potential source of valuable information. Every parish is basically a spy organization for the Vatican, has been for a very long time. Other elements were and still are followed in environments and institutions to secular character within the church, such as humanitarian associations, political parties close to the Holy See, Catholic youth movements, etc. My process was very similar to this. In summary, the elements, like me, were secretly followed, directed, and formed according to certain criteria known in certain environments. Everyone now realizes that he had in the past one of his guardian angels and mentors. Could you tell me more items on SIV? Why was it created? How long the work? The structure is top secret, but for now I can tell you that it is organized in a similar way to other intelligence structures such as the CIA, M16, former KGB, etc. It has no official fixed place, but chooses a site from time to time to meet, but always in facilities under the jurisdiction of the Vatican City. I bet. From a chronological point of view, the spark that triggered the start of the organization comes from an event that occurred in the first half of the 50s in the United States. To be exact, in February 1954. The events in question was the meeting of an alien delegation that took place in California in the base of Muroc Airfield, which later became the home of Edwards Air Force Base, with President Dwight Eisenhower, and who attended as well was then Bishop of Los Angeles, James Francis McIntyre. The meeting was suitably filmed by the military with 3 16-millimeter cameras located at various points, loaded with color film and manual mortar and spring-loaded. The latter solution, rather uncomfortable because it forced all operators to change reels every 3 minutes of filming. It was necessary because in the presence of the aliens and their spacecraft, electric motors of larger cameras could not work. They were shot a total of 7 rollers from 30 meters for a total of about 20 minutes of film. At the end, every member of the Earth delegation solemnly swore he would not tell anyone what we have seen and heard of the aliens. Now, folks, this is odd because much of the UFO folklore was based upon this supposed meeting that took place in New Mexico. Well, the Vatican is saying it never took place in New Mexico, but it did take place, and it was in California. Now, I've heard this. This is interesting. Don't ask me what happened to the film because I think you already know the answer. However, in the following days, McIntyre, probably disappointed that he had sworn an oath that he conscientiously considered unfair, he left in a hurry to Rome in order to meet the Holy Father Pius XII to tell him of the incredible event. But before Bishop McIntyre could reach Italy, he had to make one stop first in New York and then set off to Rome. Remember, back there's the days they were still using props. And a trip intercontinentally was a very long trip. But before Bishop McIntyre, the aircraft took off at first from Los Angeles after about an hour and a half flight because of sudden technical problems was forced to land in the middle of the night on an airport runway called Sky Heaven, a site in Las Vegas, during the period required to repair the plane, about an hour and a half. A man who showed up with military credentials of the U.S. Armed Forces, he was a United States Air Force colonel, he was received by Bishop McIntyre. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes, during which time the man distrusted the bishop from reporting accurately the whole affair he had witnessed. As the whole alien question was already the subject of study and controlled a number of years and had been the exclusive prerogative of the United States Air Force. The military stressed that the president had asked just an opinion of a spiritual nature, and especially for discernment in this very unusual situation, and that the oath was not referring only to possible disclosure of such an event to the whole world, but also extended to the Holy Father, not least the problem of infiltration of Soviet spies within the Vatican itself. Do you see what's happened here? Whether you believe this event happened, whether you believe it happened in New Mexico, California, the fact is it set off a chain reaction, particularly with the United States military. President Eisenhower, coming from the military, was well versed on threats. And Eisenhower, reluctantly, when he went into this, made the agreement, which was subsequently broken. And when Eisenhower realized he could not trust these aliens, as the Vatican will learn, that the threat of a full-scale invasion was witnessed by the world, and more importantly, by Eisenhower and the United States Congress. And that happened, ladies and gentlemen, of July 1954, Washington, D.C. For 3 days, fleets of UFOs buzzed the White House and the Capitol, and we were unable to do anything about it. I continue. The bishop replied that it was his duty to report to the Pope of this incredible event. Today, it is inclined to think that failure was previously wanted to give rise to this meeting, organized by some military, probably unbeknownst to the Eisenhower himself. So the Vatican's figuring this thing out. They're realizing that Eisenhower has problems, security problems, because there is an elite group who has now taken the information, and we don't know really what deal was or was not made without Eisenhower's knowledge. Before departing, the military person told the bishop that the decision to bring the news to Rome would create serious problems, and he personally would have a cost to pay. By the way, how much of the encounter with the aliens had been predicted for some divine character message is unknown. I mean, folks, you have to understand, and even us today, we just so, how should we say? Que sera, sera. Oh, aliens, big deal. It is a big deal. 2 days later, Pope Pius XII received Bishop McIntyre. After meditating a lot on the implications that could have led a purely military relationship with the aliens, the Pope decided to set up a secret intelligence service with a name along the lines of the fascist military intelligence service. The SIV, in fact, that it should have gathered all the information possible about the activities of the alien entity and the information upon which they would reap the Americans. It was vital to keep open channels of communication with President Eisenhower. The SIV was basically constituted to acquire and handle all of the confidential information which dealt largely with the extraterrestrial issue in coordination with other intelligence facilities in other countries. This shocked the world. Now, not everyone, not every country knew this. It was the elites who knew this, and I suspect made a deal. I don't know that, but that's what I suspect. What made Pius XII to think that the U.S. military would have shared such sensitive information with the Vatican? Good question. The Jesuit. You see, to be convened by the President of the USA in the middle of the night for help and spiritual support in a situation that could be called unique in modern human history, I think it is only a sign of respect and trust. To confirm this, I say that once back in the United States, McIntyre and Archbishop Edward Mooney of Detroit later were the main coordinators of the operation passing the information to the Vatican. Ay, ay, ay. However, events took an unexpected turn because McIntyre and the other members of the SIV began to have direct meetings in the absence and without the knowledge of the military with an alien race of the Nordic type, apparently positive, from the Pleiades. These aliens had been warned by the beings that were previously met by the Americans in the Californian desert. These meetings with members of the SIV occurred several times in the U.S. and twice also inside the Vatican Gardens at the Pontifical Academy of Science, in the presence of the same Pope Pius XII. Now, again, I don't know if this is true. I don't know if this actually happened. It makes sense. I mean, in a certain way, it connects a lot of dots. But let's just take it on face value that this actually did happen. I mean, folks, this would collapse every religion had it been known. But they had to do this. That's why they piecemeal it and this disinformation. It's all the process. So this was a crisis unlike any other ever. Screw your beginning. Hell, you ain't got a chance in the garden. Listen, if any God wasn't true of God, he's an ET. He's an alien. He ain't God. He's an alien. And this is what the Pope realized. The very God that Christianity was built on, no matter what your position, yes, no, in between, it's an alien. And that is the underpinning thing that this Pope took to his grave. So I asserted that Padre Pio of Pietrelcina on the existence of living beings in other worlds that they had not sinned. And for this reason, they had reached a higher degree of evolution. Is not this correct? Holy crap. Now this just brings a whole new situation. Really? The Jesuit answers, of course. But these beings who now tell us they are living on a flat plane, so to speak, different, though not angels in the true sense of the word, while the Nordic aliens that I mention are beings of flesh and blood, which although very evolved from a technological and spiritual point of view, have their corporal reality. Let's just stop this. See, I've been really pondering this. So this Jesuit says that these original beings, they live on a flat plane. It's a different dimension. It's a different reality. This is something that has never been factored into the UFO equation or ET. I mean, think about this. These creatures asserted that they had found in the Catholic Church, or more precisely in the Christo message, not so much the physical church. They are seeking the real presence of God and declared themselves willing to cooperate for the good of humanity. I wouldn't say they tricked the Pope. It's just that they found the message of Christ appealing. And it wasn't a physical God, it wasn't a physical church. That wasn't it at all. It was this statement by these beings that convinced Pope Pius XII to collaborate with them, considering them even authentic converts to the Christian faith. Probably the Pope thought that the universal church was to begin to extend his message even to beings from other worlds. However, these aliens in the following years were of decisive help for the Church of Rome in carrying out specific tasks in the world. This is problematic on a huge scale. They specifically intervened in certain political situations and social global. On this point, I invite you to reread what was written at the time of Alberto Prego, consul, in some of his books. Following, Pope John the 23rd benefited from the support of these beings who seem to had espoused the cause of Christianity, but chose to make it about the more vague angelic interventions. You see, they knew we are not mentally ready to handle this. These beings know that. I believe that there is no such thing as an angel or demon. If anything, they are extraterrestrial. Pope John had inherited, so to speak, a cooperation agreement between the Holy See and the positive aliens of the Nordic race made with his predecessor. This went on for the duration of the pontificate of Pope Roncalli, who, however, had repeatedly expressed to the pinnacle of the SIV his disappointment at the extreme confidence that it was putting in these creatures. So that today you would think that one of the reasons which gave way to the Second Vatican Council II, it was precisely the need to do a first concrete step towards the renewal of the church, but also in view of a possible and intimate contact. You see, folks, they have been working for decades how to package this, because the whole Christian message is blown out. The whole idea of some dude being crucified, all of this. And they know it, and now you know it. In reference, this is again the reporter, in reference to these interventions or celestial mediations, we can also include the alleged meeting took place in 1963 between American contactee George Adamski and the Pope. Now, that's been debated heavily. Well, we have our answer. The Jesuit says, I was just getting to that. Adamski really did meet with the Pope. He went to St. Peter just once to meet with the Pope, who had already decided that the church no longer had to maintain direct relations and or cooperation with the aliens. Though positive, Pope John the 23rd also found it unacceptable that such a relationship was revealed to the Christian people. The task given by aliens to Adamski was to rope an extreme and last agreement with the dying pontiff. He was a messenger on behalf of the same beings who had met Pope Pius XII. Yeah. Are you seeing where the schism started? These entities commissioned the same Adamski to deliver a gift to the Pope. The latter which contain a liquid substance that would disappear in a few days. This Pope was suffering from a gastric bowel disease, and from which he was suffering worsened in the last few hours of an acute peritonitis. In other words, his bowels had burst open. The Pope did not drink the stuff. He said on his deathbed, watching the crucifix, "Those arms spread of the Christ have been the program of my pontificate. I humble and most pontificate as you like, but which I assume all responsibility. I am happy with what I did and how I did it." Now, something happened here. He took to the grave something that he did, and it has to do with these aliens. However, this gesture by the aliens did conclude with the Pope with what little lucidity and energy he had left. That these brothers of the cosmos, he wrote, could have led a task definitely positive and benevolent towards humanity. But they would have to operate independently and separately to the church, and in general, by the work of man who, through prayer, acts according to the law of God, and in particularly under the action of the Holy Spirit. The aliens weren't buying it. They weren't going to do it. They didn't believe it. They knew that this was a false message. They knew it was one that created by this species. But however, they also acknowledged the divinity of the divine. But you can see, the Vatican made the decision not to cooperate. With this attempt, Adamski ended the direct relation between these creatures and the Pope himself and his successors, who, illumination trusting Pope John the 23rd, established that it was not appropriate to have direct reports. Later, in a private manuscript of Pope Roncalli for his successor, which attached a confidential dossier on the SIV, the pontiff mentioned a passage from the gospel that closed and clearly explained the attitude of the church towards the positive beings from the other worlds. And that is given in Mark 9:38. In that time, John said to Jesus, saying, "Master, we saw one casting out demons in your name, and we forbade him because he was not following us." But Jesus said, "Do not stop him. There is no one who does a miracle in my name can lightly speak evil of me. He that is not against us is for us. If anyone gives you a drink of water in my name because you belong to Christ, I say to you, he will not lose his reward." The sense, in a nutshell, is that the presumed positive activity of these aliens who had joined the Christo message should not be hindered, but be blessed. But had to be separated and parallel activity to that of the church. The aliens were therefore considered the same way as the stranger who healed in the name of Christo, and these did not prevent him to do so. In this sense, it should be added to the speech that the new pontiff, who began with the deceased Pope Pius XII, made on April 5th, 1961, and folks, you really need to get a hold of this, where he said, and I quote, addressing the crowd, which met in St. Peter's Square for the general audience, he said, "Some voices are speaking that before were unknown to us, but it's their voices that are speaking from heaven down to earth. Rumors that the reflection of the omnipotence of the Heavenly Father." They told us. This Pope, and I think that he went to his grave knowing that he did make disclosure. Look at that. Some voices are speaking that before were unknown to us, but it's their voices that are speaking from heaven down to earth. Rumors that the reflection of the omnipotence of the Heavenly Father. Wow. Seriously, wow. Can we speak of your duties within the SIV? My tasks are purely technical. The most important were as receiving secret information from a Vatican radio telescope located in Alaska and turned them to their respective destinations. Wow, folks, this is amazing. Just a moment. But what radio telescope are you talking about? I did not know that the Vatican possessed such a structure in that area. The Jesuit. The Vatican owns and operates a highly advanced radio telescope adapting systems and technologies, performed only by personnel belonging to the Order of the Jesuits, and that is housed in an industrial plant for the recovery of oil, apparently resigned, located in the United States, in Alaska. The complex is camouflage because officially the activities that take place are not the same as the structure of the VAT in Arizona and are covered by the utmost secrecy. I mean, seriously, folks, this is just, I don't know. It's just bad, bad, bad. And there you have it. Now, we thought, and I did I've known about this for nearly 15 plus years. So the Lucifer telescope is a large binocular telescope near infrared utility with camera and integral field unit for extragalactic research. Lucifer, the bringer of light, knowledge. There's the real one, folks, right there in Alaska that no one knew about except the Jesuits. When was it built, this apparatus, and especially for what purpose has the Vatican already includes other astronomical sites in various parts of the world? The Jesuit. What I can say is that it was built in 1990 with the aim of studying celestial anomalous bodies approaching the Earth, similar to what was done, for example, by the CIA, that among many of his secret eyes includes the Hubble telescope twin, Skyhole 12. Moreover, the SIV was informed during the meetings with Pope Pius XII of the approach of a celestial body in the solar system host to an alien race, evolved and very warlike. I learned very quickly that the material that I had gotten here in Rome and processed on my computer was very interesting and very secret. It was during the processing of certain data and information from this radio telescope that a probe was sent in a remote space, inserted into a space exploration program started in the early 90s called Siloe. He had photographed a huge planet approaching the solar system. I'll just let that soak in a little bit. The data was received in Alaska in October of 1995. Here began my problems. I discovered that I had not decrypted the data coming from the transmission session and created a dangerous situation. It was then that my contact told me that within the Vatican were cohabitating two factions that vied for the management of a type of information with a level of secrecy far superior to top secret. And in NATO, it's cosmic top secret. Could you provide further details in Siloe space program? Who designed the probe? Where was it launched? The probe, called Shalom, takes its name from the space exploration program started in the early 90s. I can also add that the Shalom program is in turn inserted into another, more extensive program called Kegamer, the nature of the latter and other subprograms that make it up, and it was not to be revealed of anything. For now, I can only tell you that the probe has been assembled at Area 51, had a motor, electromagnetic pulse, and once completed, was placed into orbit by an aircraft of the class type Aurora. I just want to stop right here. There's so much in this one sentence that you could do a whole program on this. I found most interesting to me was the motor. It's an electromagnetic pulse motor. I was unaware of any such technology. I continue. The probe did not have calculations and pre-launched on the trajectory and a precise Nubarian location, whereby its purpose was to approximate the planet, correcting the route as much as possible, and then reverting to solar system at a distance such as to be able to transmit data and images to the radio telescope in its secret position in Alaska. The probe was launched after completion of the telescope and carried out the transmission of filming in 1995. What you have said leads me to recall some of the theories formulated by researcher Zecharia Sitchin about the famous 12th planet and its future return. Yes, at least in major aspects. I can tell you for sure is that the SIV, in collaboration with Lockheed Martin, sent that probe who created the images from me elaborated. Now, this was converted from Italian, so there is some problems in the English. It was a very large celestial body that within a maximum of 3 years, starting in 2001, we will feel its presence in the solar system. How did you get access to such information? Currently, UFRISCO authorization supervision called Secretum Omega. That is the highest classification of secrecy in the Vatican, equivalent to cosmic top secret of NATO. It is divided into 3 levels of information. The less detailed Secretum Omega level 3 to the Secretum Omega level 1, which is the most comprehensive. My task now is to form new elements of SIV and start them to the use of its communication systems to that body. Question: in Italy, the information collected by the radio telescope is in Alaska. How does that work? In Italy, there are radio and antennas along with 2 geostationary satellites over Italy itself of an American telecommunications company, Sprint International, which is in the north and the far south of Italy. The company has a special contract with the SIV, and on a private channel sends and receives data encrypted with an algorithm for confidentiality and personal encryption, in use since 1994. Before the SIV used a cryptographic system invented by a Swiss company, which was later abandoned because one of the members of this society sold it clandestinely to the Israelis. More technical information for now I cannot give you. I would like to ask you a question about a famous Italian religious linked to the church. I am referring to Monsignor Balducci, who has publicly made certain statements about extraterrestrial theme. Balducci accidentally operates in accordance. Does Balducci accidentally operate in accordance with SIV? It is aware of its existence. Surely Father Balducci has conducted his studies and his research in a fully autonomous manner without following any type of previously established program. In his research, he has never been hampered, and in some conditions, it was in some ways has been encouraged. Just a moment. It seemed that he understood from his words that there would be an outreach program. Is it perhaps for this reason that he decided to meet me and tell me this information? The Jesuit. We are very much aware according to the system, but be aware that certain events that are about to occur involve all living beings on the planet, bar none. All of humanity in this present historical phase is experiencing a very special time and closely linked to some key events contained in the book of Revelation. Mankind must rely completely on the message of salvation and redemption of Christ, what St. Paul called the kerygma, what John Paul II seeks to bring all nations of the world. He believes that the Pope does not know how close they are to certain events that are to happen. So Pope John Paul knew but didn't know. But with all this information, what does the current pontiff know in light of the heartfelt declarations of a year now? Vatican inside, there are two currents in opposition. One is an advocate of this information program and is defended body and soul from Rotila. The other is outstretched to impede access by any means, to such an extent that some elements of this faction are also part of occult power groups that, to make as an example, control the world oil markets that is currently impacting on various international economies, with the sole purpose of crushing any initiative linked to the spread of clean energy alternatives. I think this is one of the things that the aliens brought. Groups such as the one to which you can bring the story of the famous and controversial case UFO Guardian, that you know dramatically true for the most part, except that relating to the frames of the alleged alien entities. However, the printed documentation and the information contained herein describes a real situation. The reality often exceeds the wildest fantasies. Isn't that always the truth, folks? Seriously. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. But these occult organizations are the apex of the SIV. So, he knew. What do we do? Pope John the 23rd, Pope John Paul II, they knew. It was the beginning of the end, no matter what they have tried to do since then. And this was why the Council Vatican II was formed. It was formed specifically to figure out how a deal could be made, which, by the way, was broken, but more importantly, how to begin to disclose to the world that they do not worship our God. It makes you wonder, what is our God then? Most likely not the God you and I thought. So, who is your God? Does he travel in a ship? A spaceship? Because the God of this world does. Always been disclosed to you. Read your book. They've known from the very beginning, folks. The God, the Christian God, the Hebrew God, the Muslim God is an ET. Plain and simple. So I ask you, saviors or enslavers?